I retitled my poem The Hyperion Cantos. It was not about the planet, but about the passing of the self-styled titans called humans. It was about the unthinking hubris of a race which dared to murder its homeworld through sheer carelessness, and then carried that dangerous arrogance to the stars, only to meet the wrath of a god which humanity had helped to sire. The passing of humankind was my topic. The Shrike was my muse.
Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season we'll be reading and discussing Dan Simmons' Hyperion. This is season 8, episode 3, Hyperion Cantos, covering part 3. The hosts have varying levels of knowledge of this series. My name is Dan.
My name is Talia.
My name is Andreu.
My name is Priya.
Yeah, so we have a special guest this time, Andreu. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to meet you. Maybe I guess tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with Hyperion. None of us have read it, but apparently you have.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I told to Talia, it's probably one of the best science fiction novels ever out there in the market. I would say it's even good for the general literature. So it's really, really well crafted. I read it around 10, 15 years ago. Shared with a good friend of mine. I remember writing letters to each other and saying, oh, I love Hyperion, I love Hyperion, I love Hyperion. It's so deep. And basically the authors use a lot of literature that already exists. And it's based on English literature and this way of telling tales from one character to the other and learning through the different disconnected tales what's the underlying topic, which you will discover as you keep reading. And it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful novel and has so many angles. So the author Dan Simmons can really get deep into the characters by this point of view of each of the characters, and then he can use probably his own background because the chapter we are describing today, it's about the poet, and he's a novelist and also writes poetry, fiction and fantasy. And I guess he's putting a lot of himself into the topic. And about myself, so I love the quote that Priya chose because my background is in physics, so that's why I've always been attracted to science fiction to a degree. But I also love arts. So this mixture between the poet and the fictional world is beautiful. And I moved more to social sciences and trying to study cultural loss. So it's when you have a big shock, which is this dying Earth, this being eaten by a black hole. We would talk about that today again.
Yeah, we will.
And what remains, so what's scattered from the Earth, and the small details that can be kept, and how this is used in a narrative again for the creation of new things. So that's what I'm trying to model from the physics perspective. So it really connected to me. Plus, it's connecting to our present of how we are f***ing our world badly. I was reading these articles about calculating risk these days and how we have no idea what is going to happen. And it's really, really risky. So, I mean, the planet wouldn't mind from the physics perspective, it will continue to go around the sun undisturbed. But whatever we are building on top of it is going to be quite shocked. So, it's really, we're talking about that now that it's written at the end of the 80s, and it's really present right now because all these topics are really of relevance, and they haven't been addressed that much.
Yeah, we discussed last week about the kind of prescience around the Israeli conflict, and it happened in 2036 or something in the book, and it's a little bit too close to home, right? Let's put the current events in 2023.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's your background in science fiction? Have you read a lot of other science fiction, or is this the only one you've read, or?
Oh no, I've read a lot. Yeah,
A lot?
okay.
Okay.
I think I read, if not all, most of Asimov work.
Oh yeah.
Yes, then all the utopian and dystopian novels out there as well.
I mean, most importantly, have you read Three Body Problem? Because we're going to make references to it almost certainly.
Yeah, yeah, we're talking about it. I haven't. I've been told by many people to read it, so I still.
We got to convince him. On this
I need to
board.
find time for that.
Yeah, we need to move that to the top of your list.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, for science fiction, it's on top. Yeah, it's like I'm opening other fields now, and then.
I would say though, like I do agree with you that having experience of science fiction is certainly helpful in evaluating this whole book, but having appreciation of English literature, I think, really amplifies this chapter in particular, which I'm sure Priya will be able to talk more about. But yeah, it comes across as a poet's story. It is, and it comes across that way.
Yeah.
Yes, I was very, very happy with this section.
Would you like to?
Yeah, let's do the summary.
All right. Yeah, here's the summary of the poet's chapter. The pilgrims arrive in Naiad to find it destroyed, probably due to the fighting between the Shrike and the SDF, and the poet is next to tell his tale. The poet describes how he was born via artificial insemination, since his father had been long dead before he was born on old Earth. Poet grew up on a large estate somewhere near North America, and his mother sends him off on a spaceship that will cost 167 years in time debt, with the hope that by the time he arrives, the accrued interest on the family accounts will be enough to pay off the actual debt they have. While in transit, the poet has a stroke that leaves him only able to say a few swear words. He spends 3 years on a basically prison planet called Heaven's Gate as he discovers what it is to truly be a poet. As his language slowly returns, he begins to write his cantos. After he's beaten up by people looking for protection money, he's rescued by someone who happens to read the book that he's carrying with him, and 5 weeks later, it's published. His book, The Dying Earth, is published and sells 1 billion copies, making him a millionaire many times over, which he uses to wander between obsessions of data, politics, and religion. Eventually, his wife divorces him as he piles on debt, and he asks his publisher to publish his next book. They say they will, but they are convinced that it won't sell. After 10 months of crafting the perfect book, his publisher was right. Despite her saying that it was beautiful, it does not sell many copies. He's then forced to start work on The Dying Earth 2, all the way to part 9, to pay back some of his advance from Cantos. After 6 years, his muse has left him, and he delivers a new book where the earth has died, followed by 299 blank pages. Afterwards, he tells his editor that he's leaving and heads for Asquith. Martin, the poet, befriends Sad King Billy, who is a fan of Cantos, and offers to bring him under his protectorate to Hyperion. While on Hyperion, people start to disappear, and eventually more are found murdered. They later find a video of a couple being brutally murdered by the Shrike. And Martin describes what his research has found about them. He's found that a cult believes the Shrike is immortal, beyond time, was constructed by man, and seeks to destroy the human race. Martin believes the Shrike is his muse, and writes Hyperion cantos. Meanwhile, he and the residents move out of the city of poets. Sad King Billy believes that Hyperion cantos is responsible for the Shrike, and after stunning Martin, burns the manuscript. The Shrike appears and impales Sad King Billy as he implores Martin to destroy Hyperion cantos and the Shrike. Martin throws a canister of kerosene on both Sad King Billy and the Shrike, but the Shrike has fled before it was killed. Since then, Martin spent his time in the dying city of poets, rewriting the cantos he lost and hoping to return to Hyperion to finish it.
The characters that we have in this part are Amalfi Schwartz, who is the poet's childhood best friend on Earth, who lives in Antarctica. They see each other daily. Then we have Balthazar, who is the poet's childhood teacher. We have Helenda, who is wife to a city official who pulls strings to publish the poet's book, and then she later divorces that manager and marries Martin. A quote from the book is, "I was a toy to her, a primitive who amused her by my innocence about a life she had taken for granted for many decades." Then we have Tyrena, who is Martin's editor, who names The Dying Earth. When asked by a bemused Martin Silenis who Hitler was, she replied, an old earth politician who did some writing. Sad King Billy, the sovereign on Windsor in exile, who looks a bit like a wax candle of a man who has been left on a hot stove. The Shrike, Michael the Archangel and Moroni and Satan and masked entropy and the Frankenstein monster all rolled into one package.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So yeah, Priya, you had already said that you liked this chapter. So let's talk about why you liked it.
I mean, it was just it was a little overwhelming, all the name drops. Like, here's a quote from Mark Twain, here's a quote from Keats, who I adore and love, by the way. There are quotes left and right from authors that I have not read, so I couldn't fully appreciate, but there is a lot of references to classic literature that, you know, I have come across at some point in or another when studying English lit, and it's these little callbacks that come to me. I'm like, that name's familiar. I read something and probably loved it, or there are names that I have read like so much of and loved. So it was really like a little bit of a departure from the tone set by the last story, right? I mean, quite a departure. I know your feelings, Dan, about the last section. So it was really delightful, because even I think in the last section we had like the story from the colonel. What's his name? I've already forgotten his name.
Kassad.
So Kassad's story there, I felt like we found that it was kind of like vulgar in a way where we were sometimes missing the points of like the things that he was describing. And then there's also the difference of that story being told in the second person versus this being told in first person. And I had some comments and feelings on the second person narration of Kassad's story. And I was like, please let this be first person. And it was. I'm not sure how I feel about him switching back and forth, you know, like some of the stories are first person, some are in second person. So I'm still trying to kind of figure out how I feel about that writing style in general. But I'm very happy that the poet's story was given to us in first person, because then his voice, his prose, his manner of speaking really kind of shines through. And whatever things he says that might be vulgar, I feel like they're couched in so much poetic and literary prose that I don't mind it, you know. And besides, it's often very funny. So overall, very delightful to read. I was like underlining like every other line, and I'm like, I can't even like tab these pages because I'll be tabbing all of them. So yeah, I tried to, you know, bookmark the most important ones, but overall it was like a really good section to read.
Yeah, as I was reading it, I was like, Priya is gonna love this chapter. Like that was my main thought.
Same.
So, yeah.
And how did you feel about this?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, you know, in the spirit of writing, I'm gonna put my feelings into one of the quotes from the book here. Says, what the Cantos lacked in sales have made up for negative reviews. Indecipherable, archaic, irrelevant to all current concerns, said the Times book section. M. Salinas has committed the ultimate act of non-communication, wrote the Irvin Carpi in the TC Squared review, by indulging himself in an orgy of pretentious obfuscation. Marmon Hamlet on AllNet issued the final death blow. Oh, the poetry thing from the what's his name? Couldn't read it, didn't try. So I had a pretty hard time reading this one. It was, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was like over the top, you know, like trying to like be, you know, like obfuscated and like really like flowery language all the time, and the kind of nuances of this like extremely literary like prose like I kind of lost on me, and so I had a hard time reading it. I kind of picked out the parts I liked based off of like where I was seeing the history of the world. I thought the stuff about Earth was really interesting. Like Andreu already mentioned, you know, talking about like how the dying Earth and all that stuff. the stuff on Hyperion, where you kind of get a little more lore, because we've heard about Sad King Billy all this the whole book so far, so we get a lot more about him and what he's about, and like he was much different than I expected. I was expecting sort of like this brutal dictator, but he's sort of just like an art lover, and he just brings all his friends in there and tries to make a hippie community or something. So I thought that was interesting, but yeah, I had a much harder time reading this one than the previous two chapters for sure. And it's not that I disliked it; I just had a hard time reading it, I think. And I think it's just that the style of it just like doesn't gel with what I'm used to reading, which is boring science fiction.
That's so interesting. It just speaks to what different readers we have amongst our co-hosts, because
Yeah.
this is my bread and butter, and you were like, this is non-communication.
Non-communication. It's just such a piquant word. Like of all the things you can say, like that's non-extraordinary.
But according to Martin, he is to be a true poet is to be a god. So you don't always understand the words that come forth from God.
Nor are you always understood. Exactly.
So I have the privilege to have read all the book, and for me, this is the most alive chapter. And character as well is like the most close to human, with all the creativity and all the sorrows at the same time. The only actual human, because it's the only one who has lived in planet Earth, to have all this connection to what the origins of humanity is, while all the others are migrants to a degree. And it's all the power of all the art and the sorrow and the creation and exploring the human character in all its facets beyond what it means to be human. I love the part in which he loses his language and then has to still navigate using only swear words. Like, that's so lovely and amazing. And yeah, I haven't read many science fiction that have something like that, but there is a bit. Oh, I didn't say, but I also love Japanese manga, anime, and there's a lot of science fiction there, and they tend to be quite poetic as well. So there are some of these characters who connect to that. Actually, this book, I think I picked it because it was on an anime called Psychopaths, so a real science fiction one. Anyway, going back to the character, then he also transformed his own body, so it's becoming
they're like the biohacking, biosculpting.
So all these exploration of what it means to be human at the end, if you start changing your own body and changing the shape and all of that. And that's something that humanity has maybe starting to explore right now, but we haven't gone to all the limits of that. So I think it's dense, and then I can understand that can be a tough chapter then, because it's trying to pack too many things into one single storyline. But at the same time, I think it's the richest. There will be another poetic character, but you will see that on the future. Now, for me, it's a beautiful, alive character that I think it takes a lot from the author himself, especially the editorial world. It's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely got that. Like, yeah, he probably, Dan Simmons probably had a lot of the same experience with his editor, right? Going back and forth, like the editor probably saying, "Oh, it's really good, but it's not going to sell any copies. Like, why don't you write some, some schlock that the public are just going to, eat up because they're used to like sequels and whatever." So he writes like nine sequels.
And I love that self-referential that we got. The like, all the writers, instead of forming communion amongst each other and being like downtrodden by the system and abused and exploited by their editors, they now all like hate each other because they know that they're true literary poets who are forced to write, drivel, but everyone else to hack.
Yeah. So Talia, what did you think?
Yes. So this chapter was crafted in the lab to appeal to me. So obviously I enjoyed it. I mean, come on. We have like allusions to Plato on the wall of the cave. We have the Chinese pictogram for honesty as a two-part symbol of a man literally standing next to his word. Like, of course, I ate that up. That's Xin. It's absolutely true. We get Bertrand Russell. We get like, oh, I still imagine that Huck Finn is, boating down the river. We don't just get like quotes from Mark Twain. We get the like, exactly. We get the essentialism as well. And we get some of the frustration that I've often gone on to long linguistic rants about how our ideas are communicated using words. I do enjoy that. Obviously, Priya's quote is from the beginning, I think more illustrative of larger themes in the book and that the author is getting across. But at the beginning of every section of this poet's tale is in the beginning was the word, and then some cute little addition afterward. And next came the word processor, then the thought processor, or in the beginning was the word, and the word was in binary. And a quote that I enjoyed was when he says, "Words bend our thinking to infinite paths of self-delusion. And the fact that we spend most of our mental lives in brain mansions built of words means that we lack the objectivity necessary to see the terrible distortion of reality which language brings." And that's the true darkness. That's funny to me, beautiful to me, speaks to a lot of these tenets of philosophy. And that being said, plot-wise, I loved The Priest's Tale. I thought a lot was happening here. I couldn't really tell you plot-wise what was happening here, where we see the Shrike, someone dies, but my experience of reading it was very enjoyable. And I particularly enjoyed how much my prophecies have come true, that Priya would like it and Dan would not.
You thought I would? You thought I wouldn't like it? It's interesting.
I thought that you would like it less than what. Yeah.
Then you too, for sure.
You have definitely. I mean, you've liked the entire book so far, so I think we've all really enjoyed it. But oh my gosh, the things about scratch a circle and pie peeps out. I was in discussion about this at a dinner party I was at this weekend about all right, first off, numbers aren't real. And secondly, even if they were real, we just invented them, but they always existed. All these things that you need to be really plugged into philosophy and mathematics to A, understand, but B, care about. So I found understanding and someone who cared about in this chapter. That being said, of course, it was very flowery.
I love how there's so much for people who are more literary readers to enjoy, but also so much for people who have more scientific or mathematical backgrounds to enjoy. I feel like there is this is the perfect place where different types of thinking or thinkers can kind of merge here in this space. You could be a mathematical thinker, or you can be a literary thinker, and this is the sweet spot for these two different types of thinkers, and that's something that I loved. And moreover, I just have to make this comment before I lose it, is because I didn't jot it down. But what I was just struck by this feeling. If anyone's watched the Marvel movies, where Loki keeps saying he's burdened with glorious purpose. That's the sense that I get from Martin throughout. It starts with him saying, "From my earliest sense of self, I knew that I should be a poet. It was not as if I had a choice. More like the dying beauty all about breathed its last breath in me and commanded that I be doomed to play with words for the rest of my days, as if in expiation for our race's thoughtless slaughter of its crib world. So what the hell, I became a poet." And I just love that, because I feel like this is kind of one of the insufferable things about people who are literary geniuses, which is that they're this is just my calling. What else could I do? And that's the sense that you get from this character. Even before he tells his story, he can't help himself. He has these outbursts.
He really can't help himself.
Yeah. And this is when you know that someone is this true eccentric genius who's just forced to contain everything within this one little brain, and just comes out and bursts. And you've seen people like that in the real world, and it's very satisfying to see. And in some ways, this almost feels like I feel like I said this when we were reading the fairy tales chapter in the Remembrance of Earth's Past, but this is a moment for writers of fiction to really pat themselves on the back and be like, "Hey, I'm writing a poetic character. I'm writing all this prose. it's the poet saying this, but really it's me. So like pat myself on the back. But it's deserving of the opportunity to brag, because this was really good.
Yeah, I can recognize that it's like written well. It's just like, I mean, it's not that I didn't like it either. Like I don't want to like hate on it too much. Like it's not, I didn't dislike it. And like I said, I did pick out stuff that I did like. It's just like the prose, like it was just difficult for me to read, more difficult than than the sexually explicit one from last chapter, right? But like I said, there was a lot of world building that happened. And I think Andreu, you want to talk more about like the effects on old Earth, right? I think that was pretty interesting about like and I thought like the conceit of like how it's set up, of how like the poet was able to like span like hundreds of years. Like his history like spans 200 something years, right? And so he is able to see like what happened to old Earth where other people weren't even born yet, because of the concept of time debt that was already introduced. So I thought that was like a pretty interesting one. But yeah, maybe Andrei, if you want to talk more about like the old Earth stuff that seemed to pique your interest.
Yeah, there are a couple of topics here. One that I didn't say before, which you picked, is how old he is. Like he's, I think, more than 500 years old since he was born. So also the angst, I guess, of this really long life, and somebody who lost everybody, who cared again and again and again and again. Like that will be also the story of the migrant who has to leave the loved ones and go from one place to the other, which I experienced to a degree, because for my academic career, I had to move a lot, and then you leave all the friends behind. Still, I can video call with them, but it's not the same. So that's one thing. And then through this character, you have all the world building. So you know how humanity expanded into the stars, and then what happened to the Earth, which is when they're trying to create, to find the Higgs particle in CERN. It was this worry that they will create a black hole, and will go to the center of the Earth and absorb the whole planet and disappear, which was nonsense. But anyway, that's what actually happens in the plot of the book. So you have this experiment go wrong, and then you have this black hole. Will be important anyway. Spoiler alert. And no, I mean, it will be important, but that's the only thing I'm saying.
You should read Three Body Problem.
Yeah.
Let's spoil him on their little black holes.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, it's a way of killing the Earth. It also happens in this other novel, Do Electric Robotic Ship Dream.
Oh, Do Electric.
Do
Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Philip K. Dick.
Which is also a dying Earth. So it's quite similar in that sense. So this topic of dying and what remains, and this exodus of people. So this kind of thing in science fiction. You have the hopeful science fiction, so it's dreaming of a bright future, and then the sad science fiction, which is dreaming to a dark future. So Dan Simmons is more picking into that dark side, especially into this character. And then we are introduced to space travel, the slow traveling, the setting of the gates, and
I understood for the first time in this chapter just how miraculous the Farcaster technology is. I don't know if everyone understood that before, but he describes his house, which has like 38 rooms on 36 worlds or something. Like every time you walk through a door, it's literally on a different planet.
So is it just like a teleporter or something, or is that what it is?
That's what it seems like. If you're able to like walk through a door and be on another planet, I think it's teleportation. Hopefully not too many confusing ethics about whether you still exist after you walk through the door, but that's what.
Yeah, that's also one of the important technologies that you will see on this in these worlds, which is that instant teleportation, how it's created and the role it plays. And there's this thing that when you change from one world to the other, the gravity changes, for example.
Yeah, we were thinking about gravity last chapter because we're encountering these ousters who are like low gravity or even no gravity beings. Or was it confirmed they are humans or were humans, Dan?
I don't know if I think they descended from humans, right, at some point, right? Like there was some there was some split
Human
where like
boy.
just like I said, they like last time in the Expanse, like the Belters like went off and like lived on their own, and after generations and generations, like their bodies get used to space, and that's what it seemed like with the Ousters, that like they had some of this like, similar experience where their bodies changed because they're used to low gravity environments.
But luckily, I guess Martin Silanus is still hardy enough to be able to adapt to different gravitational pulls if his house is built on these different worlds.
Yeah, that's what I was pointing as well when you do this body modification, how you're extending what's the concept of humanity. And for these beings that have evolved so much with the bodies changing so much and living in an environment that is so alien to whatever means to be human right now, then yeah, the author is also exploring what's the meaning of the limit of humanity. And if you go back to literature and folk stories and all these human tales and all of that, there's always these humanoid creatures that are there. So they remind us to humans, but they are not completely humans. And there's always this mystical presence of them, how to interact with them, if to be scared of them or to be able to communicate well and all of that. So it's a topic that's been picked through human existence for a long time. And then that's when in this chapter he's playing with that. So how to become a semi-human and then be back to being a human, and the same, losing the language, as I said, and then recovering it, which is, as Priya was saying, there's a lot of language into this chapter, and then it's linked into mathematics and all of that, which at the end, mathematics, if you speak with a mathematician, is only a language as well.
Exactly.
So it's that's why I love this chapter. I think it's putting everything together, and it's, as you see, and now I'm seeing the book, it's the middle of the book. So it's more or less what's vertebrates. You will see it vertebrates the whole story. So plot-wise, it doesn't seem significant, but you will see that it is. So.
Yeah, I didn't totally get like the part where they're talking about like his body modification stuff. Like I think they were using language that I didn't understand, like words made I didn't understand. I was just looking for it. But yeah, I mean, I guess I get the sense that like he was like mechanizing himself or something, like putting android parts in there to extend his life or something like that, but he's also like made himself irresistible to women by doing it somehow. The parts where he uses his wealth to kind of to access to like drink and do drugs and start religions or whatever, like those are pretty interesting.
Weekend hobbies.
Yeah. But yeah, the parts where he's like doing the body modification, I would say like I didn't totally get it. I mean, I understood the gist, but like I didn't understand like exactly what he was doing.
To clarify on that, because I had to, my Greek mythology knowledge has kind of left me over the years. I had to look that up. He's turned himself into a satyr, and I had to look up what a satyr is. And it is basically a fawn-like creature from Greek mythology who is known for hedonism. So it's basically like
they are lascivious by nature. That's true.
Yeah, it's sexual conduct and a lot of drinking and music.
Yes.
So usually they play
the pan flute, right?
Yeah,
and
the pan flute.
And the drinking.
It's on the Disney movie of
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Hercules.
Oh, Hercules. Oh, there's a satyr in that. You're right. Yeah.
So you're also right. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as well. There's a similar creature. And there is they're associated with Dionysus, the god of wine, and yes, and drunkenness. and also another word for satyr is Silenus, which is his last name. So he is literally named.
Which I did not know.
He's literally named.
I've done a lot of the classics, but I did not know that. So thank you, Priya.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that connection either, but it makes sense. So he's becoming a mythological creature and then getting all the powers of that mythological creature.
Do we have a moment to talk about the drug use? Because, that's always interesting to me. In Dune, I liked hearing about the alaka and thinking about the spice. So I'm interested in flashback, the drug that they use. And what was most curious to me is the flashback that he does to his, age 4 self, and then he finds his own mother and I think is discovering through this flashback what he did not know at the time, which is that she herself is indulging in this drug. So I don't know if that's a reveal or just more emphasis about the kind of world that he grew up in this like obviously privileged high society drug that you need, all this neural implants even to have access to. But I was curious if there was anything deeper than just him finding his mother, slumped over with a needle in her hand.
Maybe that's how the Shrike is able to manipulate time. It's like the people in Dune, who they take all that, like the Reverend Mothers, they take all the spice and they're able to like look at like through time. To me, like
because we haven't read the book, this is full on conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
we are open to all theories here, except for you. You can't propose
I
anything.
can't put anything forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was, a fun little anecdote within the greater story, just to like see the different ways that humanity basically plays with the same ideas. Like Black Mirror has definitely done the concept of flashback, being able to like revisit old memories in this like full sensory way. And to see it in this, depiction was equally fun. Yeah.
I guess maybe it's touching the fact that he repeats patterns that he learned from childhood, even though he kind of hates his mother. At the end, it's like
he was though like born with a silver spoon up his you know what, and he's using the exact same high society drug that his mother did.
And then you have again, we expanded on all the things that think to be human, but also this thing of being born in with a silver spoon, or even in a kind of ivory tower and then falling from it.
Right. There was like a big difference. Like he's so privileged, and then he ends up on this prison planet and
digging.
He's like a ditch digger, and he's a poet who can only say 9 words. So there's definitely a lot of juxtaposition that vulgar but very fun. And can you take a moment and just admire the restraint that the author has in this piece? Because you remember how incredibly gruesome the last chapter was. Like we have like organs being bathed in synovial fluid to keep the victim alive during disgusting like descriptions of torture and interrogation. And in this one we have the sad King Billy with like a stunner in his hand coming at you like the candlestick in the library in Clue, and it says, "I stepped forward to beat him up ... My cheek was against the stone of the courtyard, but one eye was open. The next time we come back, the person is unconscious. Like there's been some kind of like he was stunned and now he woke up. There's no like gruesome indulgence whatsoever in this tale."
Yeah, it's like pretty. Yeah, it's very like, I think the conflict or like the differences in style, like chapter to chapter, like they're just completely like each 3 of these so far have been like just completely different. I think it's like a really interesting way to write a story.
Yeah, I think that's the writer showing off a bit that he
Yeah.
can do that. That's, I guess, what a literary geek will try to do. And yeah, his background, I think, is in English literature.
That would not surprise me.
Yeah. So,
it is definitely the mark of a more sophisticated writer. Like if you've read I was recommended to read some Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, and his next book, Hail Mary, I was like, oh, okay, it's The Martian, like part 2. Like same character, same prose, same style. It's a pattern that works, but it's instantly just feels like a copy paste. And this was quite a departure.
Yeah. So that's why this is so rich, because it's putting all human, at least the one he picked.
He does like the word antediluvian. He does use that. I like that pretty much every chapter. But we all have our vices.
I get to talk about what was the name? Camberwell Tales, or it's based on series.
Oh, the Canterbury Tales.
Canterbury Tales.
Of course, I can see that.
It's because he's trying to copy the style. So the Canterbury Tales is doing exactly the same, and each chapter changes the style. So he's trying to copy that because it works.
Like Kipling, then, yeah.
And then but you have to have the skills to do it. Which is the showing.
I read that in high school and I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, I haven't read because it's not my literary background, but apparently it's good. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And back to the language part, which is important. And he only remembers swear words.
Yeah.
And I read that there is a condition. I didn't know when I read the book, but I learned afterwards that there's a condition that you can only remember swear words.
Some kind of Tourette's mixed with aphasia.
Yeah. And they discovered it because you have a conclusion, head impact, and then all the prefrontal cortex where the language is stored, it's affected. But then there are some words that are stored close to the amygdala, so that's why they are protected.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And it's because there are some words that have a big emotional
They
content,
have more emotional context. They
Which
create bigger
is-
reactions that's closer to the amygdala.
which is closer to the amygdala, and that's why they survive. And then that's what he's saying. The world, the way we see the world, is stored by words, and not only that, the emotional content that you have is stored in different areas of the brain, and that's an amazing thing that he picked, and then he used that as well to build his own complex character, which is trying to explore all the extremes of humanity: how to be young, how to be old, how to lose everything, how to gain everything, and death. Even though it's not as explicit as in the previous chapter, but it's blood all the time when he's in Hyperion. So
That's really fascinating. I wanted to go back to also like to connect that back to what Andreu was saying about the fall from privilege, fall from the ivory tower. It's very interesting coming at it from the perspective of anybody who is creative or anybody who wants to do something artistic, is that you have to fall from privilege in order to create better art. There seems to be an argument for that, because it wasn't until he loses his words that he becomes a better poet. It isn't until he loses his privileged lifestyle and has to actually do physical manual labor, which he even points out, that he becomes a better poet. So it's that this introspection that only comes as a result of not having this access to a hedonistic lifestyle, or a lifestyle where you have abundance. And we notice that after he gets all this body modification done, and he's stuck writing endless sequels to A Dying Earth just to appease to the masses, versus writing what actually comes from his heart, from his true genius self, you see that the quality of the work suffers. And when it is that he can actually be himself and write his truth, that's when he produces his best work. But the irony here is that no one else can appreciate good art anymore other than its creator. And there's this book and movie called Perfume, The Story of a Murderer. I don't know if anybody's heard of or read that. It's this it's not a person, a literary person, but it's a man who has like an amazing sense of smell. Like his olfactory senses are super heightened, and he can smell things that no one else can smell. And he makes it his life's mission to create the world's most like profound perfume. And I won't spoil how he does that. There's a very gruesome twist to it, but in the end, when he finally achieves his goal, no one else can appreciate it except for himself. But he knows what went into it, the work that went into it, the different elements that went into it. And he himself, who can appreciate it, cannot feel its effects the way that other people can without understanding it. So this idea of the genius often not being able to fully experience the impact of their words, but still knowing the technical aspects of it, is just a really interesting idea that's explored in this particular story. It's so creepy. Oh my gosh, but it's so good. The movie is really good too.
Thanks, Priya. That was bleak.
I know, it just popped into my head, and I don't know why, but I had to mention it.
I'm gonna quote Tyrena to tell you my thoughts and say, what comes across as loneliness, displacement, angst, and a cynical look at humanity. So no one wants to pay for a look at another person's angst. Sounds very bleak.
It's a nice quote.
Yeah, Tyrena's hysterical. His editor, who's like,
Yeah.
continually exploiting him and crushing his soul in equal measure, I thought was hilarious. And she does a little taste of body modifications herself, or at least like extreme fashion choices. Like she files her teeth into points, which is apparently a reversible procedure, because you can then have like a face that's completely rusted over or something. I didn't fully understand. It reminded me of this series actually called like Pretties and Uglies and Specials by Scott Westerfeld. They explore a basically version of society where there are two, like there's a caste system between pretties and uglies, but it's a pretty porous membrane because you can become a pretty with surgery. And beyond that, you can become a special with more surgery. And that's when it goes into more like superhuman. Like you can become prettier by like making your eyes bigger, shaving down your bones and becoming lighter or whatever. But specials are like, oh, you like your eyes bigger? I'm going to put a clock in my eye and bombs in my knuckles and turn my bones into titanium, and really pushing that idea of like humanity and body modification as well.
Oh, that's already happening.
Oh dear.
There's, if you want to look, it's really dark sub-culture in Instagram, at least, of body modification. There's this French guy who is cut his nose, his ears, his lips. He tattooed all the body.
I read Ripley's Believe It or Not when I was young.
Yeah, puts implants.
Gross stuff like that in there.
Yeah, and then they also cut fingers.
Oh.
Because they want to look alien, so they try to have only 3 fingers.
Well, we live in a free country, folks.
Yeah.
So
that's France.
If you
And then the guy wanted to cut his legs in 2, or at least the feet, so it will be like opened. So he wants to give the impression of being an alien. So I think it's really deep into human culture. My colleague at work, her PhD thesis is in body modification.
Wow, her PhD is in body modification.
Every single culture in the world has body modification, so it's a really powerful, it's a really powerful topic. So,
and I think as technology increases, like it's only going to become more prevalent.
Yeah, you can expand more and more, but the essence is already there, and then technology is expanding. I think that's what the chapter is also trying to capture. That you give more technology to humans, but they will keep doing exactly the same things in a more elaborate way. I also like this concept of the fashion. I have this crisp memory of the dress that the editor is wearing, and it's shifting and hiding and showing of her body. I read that 10, 12 years ago, and then it's still on my mind. That's
exactly what I brought up for the podcast before we hopped on. I wrote about the description of Tyrena's outfit and how it's covering and concealing her nudity. And they also talk about like she has spikes that go a meter above her head, hairdo which sent black spikes thrusting half a meter above her forehead, and a body field capacitor which left shifting current of color concealing and revealing the nudity beneath. To me, it reminded me of this character.
Oh yeah, that's what you had opened.
Yzma, Emperor's New Groove. But yeah, like just the whole concept really spoke to me as well. So it's funny that you remember that 12 years ago.
It's like it was really striking to me. Like, wow, you could get to there, and then you're playing with the perception of whoever is looking at you. So you really have the power of to your outfit and your body modification, everything have a strong effect on that.
Well, in the bunker world, no, I'm just kidding. I don't need to talk only about 3 body problems, but they do express themselves through their clothing in interesting ways there. I thought it was very funny that Transline, his editing house, renews the copyright to Mein Kampf every 138 years.
Yeah, and it still sells like a bunch of copies, even though no one remembers who he is. He's just the guy who wrote some stuff. He's an old German politician that wrote some stuff.
A politician who did some writing.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I traveled in Southeast Asia, and they sell a lot of Mussolini and Hitler books there.
Great.
For them, these people were good politicians who made their countries richer when they were in a bad situation. So that's the perception they had. They have pictures of Myanmar, which is in pseudo civil war right now, of Aung San Suu Kyi, who won the Nobel Prize.
Aung San Suu Kyi like had her Nobel Peace Prize and then had it redacted and then
anyway,
again.
There were books of her, like at least she was more for a democratic system. And next to her is a book of Hitler, and then they see in an equal ground for something, because they only pick specific things of the ideology or the.
I mean, but she also I think she skewers a lot of society when he said, well, my book sold like 3 billion copies. And she said, look, in 20th century old Earth, a fast food chain took dead cow meat, fried it in grease, added carcinogens, wrapped it in petroleum-based foam, and sold 900 billion units. Nuggets, folks. Or hamburgers? I don't know.
I think I took it as hamburgers, but yeah.
It was she skewers the community that she sells to. I mean, she's, I guess, savvy at her job. She gets him to write 9 sequels. So
I think it's I mean, like if he's like 500 years old or whatever, right? Like, and this book I think was only supposed to be in like 2700, or like it's not that far in the future. So like it's interesting they already would have forgot what Hitler did. Like maybe the big mistake erased all history or something.
Something must have shaken down, because I remember that even after the Great Ravine, they are still able to, like, some people are still able to remember Poe, and I think in terms of impact on the world, I hope Poe's is bigger, but I don't know.
I mean, I hope we remember like what, Genghis Khan or whatever, right? And like that's probably like the same
unalterably changed the gene pool of most of Asia, but
we only remember part of Genghis Khan, not everything. Like for the example, the slaughter of capital of Iraq, Baghdad. It's something that is not, it's not talked that much. I guess the Iraqis know it by heart, but the rest of the world is like, this Genghis Khan, he made the biggest empire in the world. So you can always be skewed on your remembering of specific historical acts.
I bet that Sad King Billy's estate has like the equivalent of the Library of Alexandria, because he seems like a protectorate, like the Medici family in ancient Rome, that just basically is a patron for all these arts, and finds this, sad sack Martin Sillinus is like, hey dude, like I read your little poetry book, come on, like I'll take you under my wing. And I bet that he's done that with a lot of other poets and artists of different kinds that he just wants to decorate his kingdom with. So it was interesting to see him definitely not as a dictator, but rather like a sad king with a face like Charles Laughton.
That's definitely what I would have expected him to be, like just creating an artist commune.
He's like a tragic clown. Like he's a connoisseur of ballet and all things graceful. His Highness is a klutz, moving series of pratfalls and comic bits of clumsiness. He's just a sad clown.
I wonder, like, if it's going to be important. And Andreu, don't tell us, but like, like in the beginning when we first meet him, like he has like this stutter that like is like really prevalent in his speech, and then when he's on Hyperion, he doesn't have it, and then they say when he like later on he does have it again, like the stutter came back.
I thought it was when he was like immersed, when his his focus is on. I don't know if that's true for people with stutters, but that's how I read it.
But yeah, he did have a stutter, and he didn't have it for a while, and then it came back. So I was like, I don't know if that's going to be important later on or whatever, because he seems to be an important character in the book. Like he's been mentioned in like in every chapter, I think.
But he died, right? Question mark.
I don't know that he died. Like it seemed like he disappeared. Like he was definitely like
he was burned, wasn't he?
Yeah, but like he and the Shrike like disappear.
Then again, like Martin Sillinus like got a new cornea and a new like skull and like lots of other stuff from getting beaten up on the playground. So maybe he could have survived.
Maybe they give him a cruciform when he comes back.
Oh God.
Man, I love that tale. That was such a good chapter.
I'm not saying anything.
I think we know for sure that the Shrike didn't die, right? Like
Yes.
they, the Holy Spirit made some kind of escape.
I love the
Um,
pronouns there.
Yeah.
he's a Bakura now. That's King Billy the Bakura.
Bakura. I did like some of the, I won't say final words, but some of the last times that we get to hear King Billy when he like confronts him about, like, I know who the murderer is, and it's your fault. Like, you summoned the Shrike. And it's almost like Priya saying, like, you have to go through this suffering to create good art. But then they sort of turn that a little bit, and he's summoned this horrible beast, this monster, and the king asks him, "Has your poetry improved?" I crossed my arms and glared at the regal dwarf slob. "No." "Has your muse returned?" I said nothing. If looks could have killed, we all would have been crying, "The king is dead, long live the king," before nightfall. "Very well," he said, showing that he could look insufferably smug as well. "Pack your bags, we're going to Hyperion." He's done all this harm, and it hasn't, improved his poetry, at least from his own point of view. So I thought that was humbling after a very smug chapter. Do we believe that the time tombs are actually empty? We've been told that they are.
Yeah, I mean that's what they say, right? Like that, or that's what he says. Like I don't know. I don't believe that they're actually empty. Like I think they're
Me neither.
yeah.
Hidden or something, because if they're traveling backwards, also just because they're empty now, it doesn't mean that they were. So I was curious about those as well. As I already made my tinfoil hat prediction last episode, but no closer to discovering if I'm right or wrong.
I'm not saying anything.
It's so difficult, right? To like not spoil.
No spoil. I love the point you raised of falling and trying to create something again. I was because in the UK the copyright for Orwell 1984 just passed.
Oh,
Yeah, and then you can publish about the book. And the guy, Orwell, I forgot his original name, but that's his
George
pen name.
Orwell's pen, yeah.
He was living on the street for a couple of months in London. So he also suffered a lot. He wrote Animal Farm after almost dying in the Spanish Civil War when he was a volunteer there with a Republican, a communist party, not aligned with the Soviets. That's why they wanted him there as well. That's why he wrote Animal Farm and 1984 as well. So this common theme of a lot of suffering and then there's creation that many geniuses have. And that rings a bell with also Sad King, and he trying to create some kind of artistic paradise on Earth. And more profoundly, since this character is trying to explore all the extremes of humanity, it rings to existentialism almost. So philosophical, what it means to be human, what's the meaning of life, why are we alive, and all of these things. We haven't talked about the way the poet summoned Keats. I forgot the name. The Shrike is by he tried to kill himself. So after he tried everything, the last solution is okay. Life is meaningless, so I'm gonna kill myself, and that's when the Shrike appears. So
yeah, he does decide to kill himself.
Yeah.
And
so that's after
and then the Shrike appears. Yeah,
experiencing everything. It's
that's similar to the priest. Priest Hoyt is like, he had all of life's experiences, or rather realized that he could have all of life's experiences because he couldn't die. He was immortal, and that's what made him decide to try and kill himself and crucify himself up there.
I think Sad King Billy's character is kind of done dirty in this chapter, because he's just like, he's the only guy who really appreciates the right things, and he meets a very sad end, as his name implies.
Rise in defense, Priya. You show him. You tell him.
But one of my favorite moments in in the conversations between Martin and the king was when he asks Martin, who is the purest poet? And now I wouldn't have expected somebody like Martin, who's not necessarily into the sort, or I wouldn't expect him to be tuned into the sort of beauty that John Keats was tuned into, to name John Keats as the purest poet. And I was like, yes, that is the right answer, because John Keats really was the purest of poets. Like, if you look into John Keats, if you watch the movie Bright Star, which is one of the most beautiful films made about John Keats and his life, John Keats was all about love and appreciating nature and connecting all that he saw around him to love. And he wrote these beautiful, beautiful love letters to Fanny Braun, who he never really got to be with because he died really young at the tender age of 25 from sickness. And I mean, you have to go read, or you can listen to from the movie Ode to a Nightingale, which is one of his best poems. It's just breathtakingly beautiful. And in that moment, I was like, I'm so glad the author chose to elevate Keats to that position of like purest poet, because it's very fitting. And isn't what is it, the capital of Hyperion is called Keats?
It's called
Yeah.
Keats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the king. But well, continue.
Yeah. So I mean, in a world where people are becoming pretty much illiterate, and we can also talk about the de-evolution of humanity, because when I read the first story about the Bacura and how they're so simple, I made a comment that it reminded me of how H.G. Wells writes about the Eloe, who are a race of, like, human-like frail creatures that the time traveler encounters when he travels thousands of years into the future. And then I was like, there's definitely some inspiration that Dan Simmons is drawing from The Time Machine, which is like the most classic work of science fiction. If you take any science fiction class, you'll probably start with The Time Machine, because so many works have kind of drawn from that or included elements of it. And then I was so satisfied to see that there's a part where Martin likens himself to the Eloe, and you see this person who has lived all these lives, and he has gone through many evolutions himself, and there are many points in time where he has lost his ability to articulate. He has kind of reduced himself to like the basest form of creatures. So it was really fascinating to see him liken himself to the Eloe, who are supposed to be humanity de-evolved. And when you think about the loss of history, like who's Hitler, and then you think about the loss of being literate, and you're losing all this this rich culture that humanity descends from. Is that also a commentary on how we de-evolve as human beings when we lose all of this knowledge of where we came from? And then also we kind of lose all sense of actually having hardships to sort of tackle in life. Like, he becomes better when he's met with hardship, but he devolves when there is no hardship to encounter. So I think that in itself is a commentary on who we become as a human species when we don't encounter any kind of adversity in our environment. Really uplifting themes.
I mean, it's funny because yeah, it's really truly my last thought, because I think we've explored as much as I have to say about this book so far. But it's funny that you appreciate them appreciating Keats so much, because I think that's the title, right? Like, Hyperion is from the Keats poem. So I was wondering when we'd get around to it. And I was reading it today, actually. It's an abandoned poem by John Keats. It's beautiful, and it is about Saturn and the other Titans, and well, maybe we'll get more into it in this book, but I was curious to see where we're going to go with that, and I hope this is not the last we hear from the poet, because in the last section, Cassad lands in the city of poets, and I realized that we could start learning about the poets earlier. And now it feels like we were leaving, and I hope this is not the last time we'll hear about the poets or the city of poets or Keats or Hyperion.
I'm smiling a lot. That's you will enjoy. I haven't read the Keats actually. Yeah, because I think when I was reading Hyperion, my English was not that good at the point, and I probably need to go to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another thing to do.
After the three-body problem.
After the three-body problem.
Yeah, three-body problem first. Well, all three of those books.
I feel like at this point in time, I'm just like, I'm like one of those people who like knocks on your door and says, "Have you heard of our Lord and Savior?" every time I mention this book, because it's become like that with this book. But since we have Andreu here, who we don't normally speak to, I have to give it another shout out. If you enjoyed the section on the poet, you will really enjoy A Canticle for Leibowitz. Yes. The whole book is basically like the chapter from the poet.
Wow.
It's written very, very poetically throughout, and it's of a post-apocalyptic world. And what does a post-apocalyptic world revert back to? And they revert back to a world that is pre-science, before the scientific revolution. And they revert back to religion. And it's now that I'm thinking about it, the number of times I've recommended that book to you, Dan, since you didn't quite love the section on the poet, you might not enjoy that book. Now I just only now am I realizing this.
Putting two and two together.
Yeah, after so many recommendations, glowing recommendations, I'm like, maybe that will be a little bit of a struggle, because the first time I read it, it was a bit of a struggle for me too. But then I reread it, and it's brilliant. It's a masterpiece, I think.
Yeah, you can get at the end of the podcast like a recommendation.
Yeah, our bios on rehydrate.space, where you can read about us. The hosts have some of our recommendations across multimedia, including books, but we can add some in the show notes for these ones.
Yeah.
Unless we're condemned to working in the Gothic romance factory under the name Rosemary Titmouse.
Since we were talking about this, how humanity reverts to primitive states, and the role of science fiction, which we all love, and that's what brings here. Science fiction is a quite recent genre.
Recent genre, yeah.
So it's only around 200 years old. So start with Verne mostly in France, and it's this. The early science fiction is really hopeful. It's this kind of the world is going to be bright and amazing, and we will have all these discoveries, and there are dinosaurs living in the center of the earth and all of that. But one of the last burnt stories is a short story about the earth having a flooding again. Just it happens. So there's no human creation or anything. And there's this boat that's they are the last survivors of the earth, and then land emerges again, and they are trying to repopulate the world again. And then what's being repopulated is kind of degenerating. And that's the first time that science fiction was
more like dystopia.
Yeah, and this topic. So it was not self-created like many of science fiction dystopias that we have now, but at least was the first one that things can go wrong in a way. It's a bit bringing together everything there. I want to correct myself. So even though modern science fiction is around 200 years, you can go back to human hopes, I think. The concept of utopia and all of that are much older. So that's technology. Technology can improve the well-being of humanity. So it's a bit older, but at least the modern dystopias are coming quite recently.
Jules Verne, that's the author you're talking about, right?
Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
Jules Verne.
I was pronouncing the Spanish.
No, that's fine. It's totally fine. I'm just clarifying because I have two of his books that I bought this year after I after I read All the Light We Cannot See, which is now on Netflix, and Jules Verne is quoted a lot throughout the book. So he's on my radar from that to read what was it, A Thousand Leagues Under the Sea, and then there's another one that he wrote. I have two books that are on my shelf by him, and
Is it travel around
Around
yes,
the world in
yeah,
around the
yes,
world in
that
80
one.
days.
Yes,
10
that's
days,
the
yeah.
one.
And 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Yeah, those are like my grandparents, like
And the one that
favorites. They were older.
travel to the center of the earth,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
where the dinosaurs are.
Yeah, I completely like I never at any point read him. So but the quotes that were in the book that he's quoted in are wonderful. So I was like, I mean to get to that.
Yeah, and there's this feedback between technology and science and literature works, because one is inspiring the other. So technology discovery is inspiring science fiction creation, which is inspiring technology development. So it's this kind of going back to what Priya was saying, that this mixture between science and art, which it's combining all the time.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Andreu, it was great meeting you. Great hearing all your insight on the book. It was you're welcome back anytime. It's great talking to you. Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks everyone for listening. Please join us next episode for part 4. The River Lays Taste is Bitter. And check out rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, and all the other stuff we put up there, including our reading recommendations. Email us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Twitter at RehydratePod, or on Mastodon at rehydrate@mass.to.